Hello, viewers. The debate in tennis regarding who is the greatest tennis player of all time is completely broken. The GOAT debate, as the youngsters call it, usually centers around tennis players like Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and some might even say Serena Williams. But this misses a crucial point. Tennis of all time was not the same. Let's do a thought experiment. If a player is really good at playing tennis, would you think that this player would want to make a living playing tennis? Would you think this player would want to play in the biggest tennis tournaments known all over the world like Wimbledon, US Open, French Open, Australian Open? Sounds like a silly question now, doesn't it? But before 1968, this was an existential question. If a tennis player was really good, he or she basically had a choice. Either they could make a living or they could play in the best tennis tournaments. So this resulted in a situation where the best tennis players were not playing in the best tennis tournaments, simply because they were not allowed to play in the best tennis tournaments once they turned professional. That is, they started making a living playing the sport they were so good at winning in. This makes it very disadvantageous for those tennis players who couldn't afford to continue playing in the big tennis tournaments or just wanted to make a living out of something they were really good at. Do you see the problem here? The problem here is in a sport where statistics are often used to measure the greatness of a tennis player, the greatest tennis players of a certain era were not winning those titles which will be used in a debate to decide how great a tennis player is. And the best name to exemplify the fault lines in this debate or the flaws in it is Richard Pancho Gonzalez. Let's learn more about him in this video. Tennis is a sport that embraces the amount of major titles a person has won. Richard Pancho Gonzalez collected only four, two in doubles and two in singles. But whenever conversations arise about what players are considered the best ever in history, Pancho Gonzalez's name always surfaces to the top. He did not earn this distinction for longevity on the amateur circuit. He was wooed away by Jack Kramer's professional contract in 1949, just 3 years into his amateur career. But for his abundance of natural gifts exhibited as a professional for 17 long years, from 1950 to 1967. Once the Open era arrived in 1968, Gonzalez returned to the major competitions. His longevity was still as impressive as his playing acumen. And when he finally hung up his competitive racket in 1973 for the Grandmaster circuit, he had won more than 100 titles in 25 years. Pancho Gonzalez had an arsenal of shots coiled in his athletic 6 foot 3 inches body. He played with a chip on his shoulder that caused many of his opponents to find him an intimidating presence. He was relentless, forceful, and hard-charging. Gonzalez's on-court persona was intense. Rod Laver said, "He gets meaner every time you play him." Gonzalez was known for possessing one of the game's finest serves. It was big, it was powerful, it was precise, and it was his most potent offensive weapon. Pancho gets 50 points on his serve and 50 points on terror, Jack Kramer once said. Gonzalez himself embraced Kramer's assessment, saying, "The great champions were always vicious competitors. You never lose respect for a man who is a vicious competitor, and you never hate a man you respect." Gonzalez's ground strokes were balanced well enough to keep his opponent guessing as to what was coming next. Was it a stinging forehand crosscourt or sliced backhand down the line? and his net game was tightly constructed with deft angles and superior touch. Gonzalez was a stylish, savvy player, the complete package. He was a fan favorite, an attraction everywhere he played. He emoted toughness on court, but was a player thousands paid to watch. His list of accomplishments is significant, and perhaps the only blemish on his career might be labeled as the best player in history never to have won Wimbledon. Why did he not win Wimbledon? We've got into that in the beginning of this video. If you want a more detailed analysis of tennis before the Open era, I would recommend you check out this video. Coming back to the topic, Gonzalez's opening round match against Charlie Pasarell at Wimbledon in 1969 went into the record books as the longest match in Wimbledon's history at the time, which was surpassed in 2010 by John Isner and Nicolas Mahut. Gonzalez was 41 years old at that time and he was nearing the end of his career. Contrarily, Pasarell was 25 years old and just starting his career. Gonzalez prevailed in a slugfest that took 112 games, 5 hours and 12 minutes and spanned 2 days. 22-24, 1-6, 16-14, 6-3, 11-9. The Mexican-American Gonzalez grew up in Los Angeles, California. He had no formal tennis training and he never took a lesson. Outside of a few tips from a high school friend who was the one to dub Richard as Pancho, he taught himself tennis. Gonzalez had intangible gifts only the greats possess. Prior to turning professional, Pancho Gonzalez won 6 US championships, 2 US National Men's Singles Championships in 1948 and 1949, 2 US clay court singles titles 1948 and 1949, the US Indoor Singles in 1949 and the US Indoor Mixed Doubles in 1949 with Gussie Moran. He won the 1949 Wimbledon and French Doubles Championships. On the pro circuit, he won 15 major championships, including the US Pro Championship 8 times, from 1953 to 1959 and again in 1961. He also rose to the world number 1 ranking, holding that lofty perch for a record 8 years from 1952 to 1960. Of course, this was a record at that time. If Earth was on the line in a tennis match, the man you want serving to save humankind would be Richard Alonso Gonzalez. In 1948, Gonzalez, who was ranked 17th nationally, was seeded number 15 at the US Nationals. In the quarterfinals, he defeated number 1 seed Frank Parker 8-6, 2-6, 7-5, 6-3. He played a crazy 4-setter against Yaroslav Drobny in the semifinals, winning a topsy-turvy match 8-10, 11-9, 6-love, 6-3. Against number 10, South African Eric Sturgis in the final, Gonzalez cooked in the first 2 sets 6-2, 6-3 and won the championship 14-12 in the third set. The following year, Gonzalez was seeded number 3 and had barricades in nearly every round to reach the final against number 1 American and fellow Californian Ted Schroeder. In the quarterfinals, number 11 Arthur Larson forced him into a 5th set 4-6, 6-1, 6-3, 2-6, 6-1. Number 9 Parker pushed Gonzalez into another 4-setter in the semifinals and Schroeder had him pinned down leading 2 sets to love before he rode back to victory 16-18, 2-6, 6-1, 6-2, 6-4. At just 21 years old, too young and inexperienced according to many, Gonzalez turned professional. His first opponent was none other than Jack Kramer himself, who had given him the offer to turn professional. Jack Kramer taught the youngster a lesson, winning 96 of their 123 matches. Kramer knew that despite his success against Gonzalez, at 5-all in the 5th, there is no man in the history of tennis I would bet against him. Within 4 years, Gonzalez found his groove and began throttling his opponents. In head-to-head competition, he defeated Tony Trabert 74-27, Ken Rosewall 51-25, and Lou Hode 51-36. He won the Wembley Pro title 4 times, 3 of them consecutively from 1950 to 1952 and once more in 1956. He was a finalist at the French Pro in 1956 and 1961 and he won the Tournament of Champions 3 straight times from 1956 to 1958. Gonzalez had remarkable stamina, competing with younger players well into his 40s. In 1970, at the age of 42, he defeated the great Rod Laver in a 10,000 US dollar winner take all match played in Madison Square Garden in New York before 15,000 people. In 1972, he managed to win the Des Moines ATP tournament. Remember, Pancho Gonzalez had started playing tennis decades before the ATP even existed. This is the greatness of the man who never features in the GOAT debate, and that is why the GOAT debate in tennis, that is the debate centered around who is the greatest tennis player of all time, in my opinion, is completely broken. Let me know what you think in the comment section.